Good afternoon. It's Monday, 15th of June, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. This is UK Column News. I'm Ben Rubin. I'll be your host today, and I am delighted to be joined in the studio by Mr. Brian Gerrish. Hello, Brian.
Hello to you. Great to be here.
It is great to be here. I do love a Monday. We've got a packed show today. We're going to be talking about the emerging digital Gulag, including the very recently announced ban on social media for the under-16s, which was actually just announced a couple of hours ago. We're going to be looking at the Filton 4 sentencing for terror offences, the advanced propaganda programmes being deployed by military intelligence against British populations, the suicide, supposedly, of a vaccine whistleblower in France, the role of Albania as an incubator for the New World Order, and much more to come. But we're going to start today by looking at the ongoing divide and rule operation that is taking place on the streets of the UK, with specific reference to the tragic events which took place last week in Belfast after the brutal attack on Stephen Ogilvie, who was left with life-changing injuries, including the loss of his eye, for which the 30-year-old Sudanese national Hadi Aladid has been charged with attempted murder. Aladid has also been charged with possessing a knife in a public place and threatening to kill an NHS radiographer, remarkably. And this, for me, is just another tragic example of poorly vetted foreign nationals given full access to British society, carrying out acts of extraordinary violence against our citizens, aided and abetted by complicit politicians and a legal and political system which appears to have been set up to deliver those exact outcomes. Predictably, this has triggered serious outpourings of anger across the country, most notably in Belfast, as we reported on last week on both Wednesday and I think on Friday, actually. We saw groups of men attacking the homes of migrants, setting fires, going door to door, terrorising families in what I think can reasonably be described as a pogrom. And while I understand this reaction, I absolutely do not condone it. And actually, I feel it's completely unjustified and also counterproductive to any supposed nationalist cause, as I'll get into. It's also created a whole new series of victims, including Sumaya Nakazibwe, who was interviewed for ITV News.
The only thing I did not get from the house were the letters my children wrote for me, because that is all I have from my children. The letters that they wrote for me 3 years back when I was leaving them back home. I think that is the only thing I didn't get. I only got my passport, my laptop, and my uniform, because I have to go to work.
This is a nursing student who's come to this country and has lost treasured memories, letters from her family because of actions that ultimately had nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
You know, so this is another injustice. We're piling injustice on top of injustice, and also handing a narrative victory to the people who are actually behind this entire situation, because we're seeing a scenario play out where native populations are very now easily framed as the aggressors. And of course, in all of the mainstream coverage, the original crime, the attack on Stephen Ogilvie, goes completely unmentioned. And this is something that we've seen across the board, whether it was in Southport last year or any of these other instances that are playing out on an all too regular basis. So predictably, there was a counter-protest which started over the weekend, the supposed anti-fascist response to the supposedly fascist actions taking place over the preceding days, heavy involvement from the unions, organisations like Stand Up to Racism. You saw a sign a moment ago calling for open borders, which is absolutely not going to solve the problem. In fact, that's going to make things exponentially worse, whether these people realise it or not. And to get a glimpse into the mindset of some of the people who are on the ground at the Belfast protest, let's have a little listen to this interview carried out by Keith Wood, the Irish journalist.
The far right from England, from America, and even from here are trying to divide the working class so much.
That's the Refugees Welcome t-shirt, right? So the man that did the stabbing on Monday was originally a asylum seeker. I think he was granted a visa through the Home Office. So what's your thoughts on that? I mean, what would you do to prevent things like this happening if there's a security concern from asylum seekers?
I think bad men are bad men, and the issue is male violence, not refugee violence.
What do you say to people that say, well, okay, men commit violence more than women, but in the same way, some of these groups that are being brought in commit violence at higher rates than native groups? And maybe if you want to have a culture that's friendly to women's rights and it's a safe environment for women, you shouldn't take people from cultures where that's respected less.
Belfast is not a place that is shy of violence. We all have seen the violence. We've seen the Shankill butchers. We've seen, the armed paramilitaries. We've seen people getting burned out of their houses before. That all seems to have had a collective amnesia with regards to this. So I think a bad person's a bad person. Doesn't matter where they're from, what colour their skin is, who they are. If you're a bad person, you're a bad person. And male violence is the epidemic that we need to talk about here.
So it's all men.
Quite extraordinary, Ben, and so obvious what's happening here. Society is to be divided on every possible subject, including the woke subjects. This is about division. This is against getting people at each other's throats, whether it's left or right or black or white or Christian or non-Christian or men or women. It's so obvious. And yet that young lady has bought into one of these agendas, and that's what colours. She cannot think for herself. She's got to think within the constraints of the reframing she's had. And I've used that word reframing deliberately because we'll come on to that a little bit more in a minute.
Absolutely. But then on the flip side of it, and one of the reasons why I said that the attacks that took place in Belfast, the reprisals ultimately against foreign immigrants in the city are counterproductive, because unfortunately that is now played into the narrative that she's putting forward, which is that it's a male violence issue, it's not an immigrant issue.
Yes.
So actually, by carrying out these acts, you're helping reinforce the stereotypes and making any kind of workable solution more difficult to achieve.
And this allows the state to continue the draconian measures because these violent males need to be surveilled. They need to have the face recognition.
Well, exactly.
And they need to be hauled off the streets and put in prison via an AI system with no jury. So that young lady, very, very, very naive. And as were the young men who were actually involved in the violence and the arson on the streets.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of work to be done by many activist groups to understand who their real enemy is and who their friends are.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned the politicians there. So I got this from Nick Griffin's Telegram channel, who I actually believe is on the ground over in Belfast at the moment. I thought this was an excellent banner because essentially what you're seeing here is the act of violence on the left-hand side. And the real, without trying to absolve the individual in question from what he's done, but actually we can see there, if we can get that back on screen, that they're calling out Sinn Féin, the SDLP, Alliance, the Green Party, People Before Profit. Essentially, this is on you. You've got to stop the mass importation of unvetted illegal immigrants now. And actually, people's anger and these reactions, not violent reactions, but channeling that energy in a constructive way, needs to be directed towards the political class who've made this whole thing happen, ultimately. Right? And so these protests and counter-protests taking place all across the UK, Glasgow, Brighton. Also, I saw that Patriotic Alternative were on the ground in Leicester And I like Mark Collett, and I have a lot of respect for Sam Mellier, who are both involved in Patriotic Alternative. But I will say that I thought this banner was a tactical mistake, because essentially what's happening here is just a direct mirror of the Black Lives Matter messaging. And I didn't agree with Black Lives Matter, and therefore I don't agree with White Lives Matter because it's inherently divisive. It plays into the hands of the establishment and actually lands us directly into this divide and rule constructs that I've been talking about for months now, right? This idea that on the right, you have the white, masculine, native, rural, conservative, Christian types represented by this White Lives Matter.
And the young lady blaming the violence on males, that comes under the masculine side.
Absolutely. And then on the left-hand side of that diagram, if we can get that back up quickly, we can see the black, feminine, immigrant, urban, progressive, Islamic, Black Lives Matter. And these are the two opposing kind of polar opposites within the divide and rule agenda, which are preventing any kind of constructive discourse taking place, any kind of constructive progress taking place. And actually, the term that I very much stood behind and would like to see more of back in 2020, and is still absolutely relevant today, is that all lives matter, ultimately. Isn't that what we should be pushing for?
This is the correct starting point. All lives matter. And then we should be looking at what is actually destroying society based on that agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, crucially, and again, I spoke to Nick Griffin about this, former leader of the BNP, when I interviewed him a few months ago, is this idea of English justice, which is predicated on the rights of the individual, the presumption of innocence, trial by jury. And actually, if you're not defending those fundamental principles, then you can't really call yourself a nationalist. And because what is the nation if it isn't fundamental principles of what it means to be English?
Justice and the Constitution.
Absolutely.
This is an absolute key point.
Yeah.
And of course, where people are straying away from this, and we have violence on the streets, and we have people injured by the residents of this country, then that is not following the rule of law or the Constitution. So there are many, many issues that people have got to get a proper grip of to stop this split in society, which only helps the state become ever more domineering.
Helps the state and destroys what we are fundamentally about as a people, ultimately. We don't do collective punishment. It's not how it works. And if you're going to engage in collective punishment, then you're undermining the core essence of what it means to be English, as far as I'm concerned. We're also beginning to see things like this taking place. So this was an unrelated incident, took place in Bolton last week, which was a firebombing of an imam's home. I mean, you couldn't think of a better piece of propaganda for the establishment here when we start seeing things like this happen. I mean, who knows who this guy was? Could be a state agent provocateur, for all we know.
We don't know.
Absolutely no idea.
People need to be asking what they are seeing and why they are seeing things and what they're hearing and why they're hearing that particular piece of information. We'll pull this apart in just a few seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, all of this, whether it's the attacks in the reprisal, should I say, in Belfast, this firebombing that took place last week, essentially just creating more ammunition for the state to bring in the kind of draconian restrictions that they want to. And what does that look like? Well, here's an example, just one. Here's a data centre that they're looking at building across Scotland. I think there's like 25 of these currently, which are being slated to be built across the north of England and in Scotland. And ultimately, these are the control infrastructure for the New World Order.
And the data is not allowing good human beings to communicate with each other in a proper and reasonable way. This is, of course, going to be channeling all of the facial recognition and the tracking of individuals and the databasing of individuals. So this is what a modern Gulag looks like on those green fields, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more violence that we see on the streets, the more likely that the mass population, ultimately the silent majority, Middle England, will just say, yes, we need this because the country's descended into chaos and we got to bring in these systems in order to re-establish some kind of order. And that's what we have to avoid.
That's what we have to challenge. Thank you for that, Ben. Well, many people sent me over the weekend this Daily Mail article revealed how the shadow unit of government thought police set up by ex-MI6 agent is trying to keep a lid on Britain's simmering racial tension. So in the headline, the Daily Mail is reinforcing the idea that the state is protecting us, although they ask questions in the body of the article. But we've got this sort of dual approach. The state is protecting you, and the Daily Mail is then going to say, well, perhaps the state is not protecting you. But let's have a look at some of the comments, and let's bring this one in. So while the streets of Belfast were ablaze with anti-immigration protests last week, behind the scenes, a group of spies, spinners and soldiers were deploying the dark arts to try to diffuse tensions. So once again, we see that cognitive issue in that statement. These people are applying dark arts, but apparently they're only doing that to try and diffuse tensions. What the Daily Mail doesn't start by asking is the state using these dark arts techniques in order to inflame tensions? And that is certainly the position that the UK column would say. We are seeing the state ramp up violence because by more violence, more state control can come in. So if we follow through the article, I've just got a number of quotes here. So the name of the secret government propaganda unit trying to manipulate events makes it sound like an innocuous back office operation, the Research, Information and Communications Unit, or RICU. And the article goes on here by saying, but the dull moniker is part of the deliberate camouflage of an outfit which, quote, uses deception and skullduggery to try and manage the challenges of multiculturalism. This article with the Daily Mail is so stupid and so dangerous because the journalist, Glenn Owen, clearly understands that what he's seeing is dangerous manipulation by the state. He talks about it in the article, but of course he doesn't call it out for what it is, which is an attack on the wider population by the state itself. If we continue through, we've got this one here. The 22-strong unit was established in 2007 by the late Charles Farr, a former MI6 officer, as part of the Prevent Counter-Terrorism strategy. So this isn't about information into the community in the first issue. It's about state control via claims of what is terrorist activity and what is not. Now, the Daily Mail uses an anonymous spokesperson. We've no idea where they come from. We'll assume government. This is one of the quotes. They, RICU, are working with the Police Service of Northern Ireland's C3 Intelligence Unit to identify those posting the online calls to protest in Belfast and other areas, as well as giving strategic messages to the police to ensure that the protesters were portrayed as unsympathetic thugs rather than activists and effecting behavioural change. Now, the quote is a little bit ambiguous because I think the branding of behavioural change is on RICU itself and not on the activists. There was a little bit more. It went on to say RICU had also been advising the police in Southampton following the horrific murder of Henry Nowak. RICU made sure that the liaison team dealing with the family were well briefed. Now, this is a critical statement here because what is being admitted is that when an act of violence takes place, when the family speak out, you cannot even believe that they're talking as individuals. They're talking in their own right as members of that family. The government has already been in alongside them to get them to spout a line, propaganda, reframing. And of course, this isn't declared to the public. So the public has no way of understanding whether what's coming out of the mouths of the family is what they really believe, or that they've been intimidated by the sheer presence of the RICU officers to say what the government wants them to say. This is democracy, apparently, in UK in 2026. Now, if we bring up this statement, RICU is regarded by many Whitehall insiders to be, quote, out of control after last year putting its name to a Home Office recommendation that the police should record more non-crime hate incidents. And of course, we're now seeing people certainly being brought into the courts, but also put in prison for this sort of nonsense about hate speech. So we've got a government unit spreading propaganda, helping to inflame violence, but also helping to put more people who dare challenge this system in prison. Now, of course, Daily Mail well behind the times, because even last year in August 2025, Professor David Miller had written a fantastic article about RICU itself on the UK column. This is the title, How the British Intelligence Network of AstroTurfed Muslim Civil Society Groups is Kept Secret and Deniable. Now, this is a very long and very comprehensive article, so I'm just going to take a couple of quotes. But Dr. Miller says here that the RICU is part of the intelligence community and is not simply a communications unit. There is a significant and coordinated propaganda network. And he says that key elements of internal propaganda machinery have been developed by those with experience of such activities in the military, as well as drawing on the experience of the intelligence services. So RICU, sold by the government as just a nice organisation helping people understand that they should be well behaved and nice to each other, whereas the reality is this is a pretty vicious state apparatus which is capable of inflaming violence, in my opinion, in order to help achieve further lockdown with the state itself. Now, the Daily Mail, well behind the times compared to the UK column, because back in 2011, 2012, we published a unique article about the British Cabinet Office collaborating with the French brainwashing guru Olivier Willier to change the way we think. And this was 2011. In fact, the UK column exposed the government's use of applied political psychology to control public thought and behaviour. And if we have a government fomenting wars, which we do, we shouldn't be surprised if the government is going to use this psychological techniques to cause more trouble. And just a further little quote here, these techniques of behavioural change, getting the public to do what the government wanted, were unleashed during the COVID-19 scamdemic to enhance public fear via the government's SAGE and SPY-B units. And the UK column again took the lead in warning the public what was happening here. Now, with a bit of help from AI, if you ask the right questions, you can get the information out. I'm going to say that ChatGPT kindly printed this chart on the left for me. This is a map, and I think it is a very accurate map of the UK government's security, behavioural insights team and propaganda infrastructure. And essentially, on the right-hand side, we've got the security counter-terrorism activity, and you will see that it comes down to RICU here. And down at the bottom, we've got the fact that this is carrying out prevent communication, supposedly to stop terrorism. It's looking at digital content and social media, and it's getting involved in the public narrative to get the government's opinion across. On the left-hand side, under the same government control, we come through to scientific emergency advice, and very quickly under the SPY-B, we've got the behavioural science being applied. And as the Cabinet Office Mindspace said, in order to get people to behave and think as the government chooses. So this is controlling the narrative. RICU briefed the families as to what they should and should not say. This is reframing. It's applied psychology. It's also propaganda. But basically, we can be sure, well, we are seeing it around us, that as these propaganda units have increased their manipulation, terrorist violence hasn't decreased, it's increased. So we need to be very suspicious about these organisations. And Ben, I just wanted to play a little bit more of the Daily Mail's clip on the violence in Northern Ireland, because this is a heavily nuanced clip of the Daily Mail with the music in the background. So let's just have a listen. So I'll just say, in my opinion, that little video clip, heavily nuanced by the Daily Mail. This is not about calming people down. This is about winding them up. But we'll talk about more of this in UK Column Extra after today's news.
Thanks for that, Brian. That's fascinating. This idea that everything is dramatised, everything's a storyboard, everything's a narrative.
Yeah, we're not interested in truth and facts. We just drift the narrative. So Daily Mail failing miserably there to get into the subject and report the real dangers of what the deep state is doing in the United Kingdom in 2026.
Yeah. Also fascinating to see that all of these attempts to reduce terror have increased terror. It's like all the attempts to reduce hate have increased supposed hate. And it seems to be that they're either not doing very well or they're being dishonest about their intentions. I'm not sure entirely which it is. And actually, talking of terror, just going to quickly reference the results on Friday, the sentencing of the Filton four, Charlotte Head, Samuel Corner, Leona Cameo and Fatima Rajwani, the Palestine Action activists who received sentences of just over 26 years collectively for actions with a terrorist connection. It relates to their involvement in the actions on the Filton site over near Bristol of Elbit Systems, which is one of Israel's main private defence contractors. And they took part in this direct action as a result of Elbit Systems' involvement in manufacturing weapons used to kill Palestinians, ultimately. I mean, this is what they're doing there. And you can see that they were smashing computers, drones, other military equipment, and also, unfortunately, did assault a police officer who ended up having his spine fractured, should I say. This trial has been ongoing now for a couple of years. These events you can see here took place on August the 6th, 2024. And there have been two trials. The first trial last year effectively collapsed. There was a second trial that took place ending earlier on this year. And it's extraordinary for a couple of reasons. First one being that there were two trials. Right? So the first one collapsed and then they had a second trial. So that's extraordinary. But also the fact that Justice Johnson, if we can just drop him on screen, announced on the day of sentencing that he would be sentencing for crimes with a terrorist connection, right? And this is only after the CPS applied on the day of sentencing on Friday to have these four young people sentenced as terrorists. So essentially, you've gone through a trial, the jury have considered the evidence, they delivered a guilty verdict, and then the charges have been changed, which is extraordinary.
It should be extraordinary.
Unprecedented.
But it's heading into the norm bracket. The justice is whatever the judge in a star chamber wants to enforce. This is the danger of the removal of jury trial.
Yeah. Absolutely. And very interestingly, because a lot of what you've been talking about recently, Brian, last year in the original trial, Justice Johnson had to apologise to the court because he attempted to have the defence barrister, Rajiv Menon, prosecuted for contempt of court for reminding the jury that they could dismiss the charges
by nullification.
So apparently it's contempt of court to remind the jury of the power that they have. Yeah. Extraordinary. Now, it probably won't surprise you, certainly, Brian, that Sir Jeremy Johnson is very closely linked to Sir Brian Leveson. Leveson actually appointed him as a judicial commissioner in 2020. A judicial commissioner supports the investigatory powers commissioner. That's who Brian Leveson's current role is, investigatory powers commissioner, which gives him extraordinary powers. He basically oversees the methods of all of the military intelligence agencies and the police, and was involved in bringing in the legislation that we've spoken about extensively in the past, the Investigatory Powers Act, criminal conduct, which essentially makes it legal for state operatives to break the law. which in alone as a sentence shouldn't be something that you can say. How can it be legal to break the law? It defies belief. But this is where we are right now. Importantly, both Leveson and Johnson are benchers at Middle Temple, one of the four Inns of Court. And I think really importantly, one of the other benchers at Middle Temple, in an honorary position, one of the royal benchers, in fact, the only royal bencher in the Middle Temple is Prince William. So we talk about the King quite a lot. We talk about other members of the royal family, but Prince William is absolutely involved in, or certainly has direct visibility and potentially oversight of what's going on in the legal system. And I don't think that many people really understand that.
Thank you very much for that. And we live in troubled and dangerous times. And the key to getting through this is for people to understand what's really happening and who's attacking us. And I'm happy to say, I've said it many times, that if you look for who is attacking us, we are being attacked by our own government. This is very clear. Well, let's just move on to UK column and material that we've produced. And I want to remind people that the UK column magazine, the first one that we published, is this edition here. And it's opened onto the page for the article I wrote about Leveson, the fall of jury nullification and the rise of star chambers. So if you haven't got a copy of that magazine, this is a very long article that I wrote. So I think it's absolutely correct for timing and the subject, because what we are seeing now is our traditional system of justice stripped out of the courts to simply give judges power within what is known as a star chamber. £15 for a copy of that magazine. And overwhelmingly, from all the copies we've sold, people have said that they think it's fantastic value for money. So if you haven't got one, buy a copy. There's another edition coming out fairly shortly, and we're sure you'll find that one will also be very engaging. Now, if you saw the little spoiler in the magazine, of course, what's coming up is the UK column 20th celebration in Plymouth on the 18th to the 20th of September, having to remind myself of the dates there. And this is a huge celebration of 20 years of work by the UK column team, and that team has included many, many different people over the years. We recognise the work that they have all done. So we will be talking about our history, how we came into being, what it's been like to be working in the UK column, trials and tribulations, but also positive points and successes. It's all going to be there, and we'd love to have you along. There are still some tickets. So if you've been thinking, should I or shouldn't I, we'd say to you, get onto the UK column website. There's the advert for the 20th celebration. Buy a ticket. Treat it as a holiday. You're going to be coming down to the beautiful environment of Plymouth and the surrounding area and meeting up with many people to have lovely conversations, humour, as well as covering some of the more dark subjects. So we look forward to having you to join us. Now, coming up tonight at 7 p.m, we've got Germ Warfare Weekly Banter with Mike and Charles. That's going to be looking at alternative narratives and false dichotomies. We've also got Carl Zhao, Chinese History Series, founders of the Han Dynasty, local bully to rebel leader, and encourage people to have a look at this. This is part of the UK column, helping people to understand worldwide. The more we understand other nations, other cultures, the more chance we've got in dealing with what's obviously a vicious new rules-based international order that would have us all in the camp. So just encourage you to do that. Now, I want to move on by also recognising really excellent work by a lady, Christine Cotton. I was shocked actually over the weekend to understand that she has recently passed away under very tragic circumstances. And if we just bring the Substack, this is John Leake's Substack, where I read the original report. Pfizer whistleblower Christine Cotton takes her life after a year of excruciating idiopathic pain. This is a very nice picture of Christine. But of course, this lady was a lady that the UK column was very, very pleased to engage with in the dark COVID days. And apart from anything else, UK column worked very hard with French professionals in order to report what those French professionals were saying, because they said it was very difficult for them to get coverage in English-speaking media. So this is just a very short clip of Alex Thompson doing a great job of translating while presenting in French Christine Cotton.
Notre prochaine intervenante est la désormais célèbre Christine Cotton. Christine, pouvez-vous nous éclairer sur ces différents points, s'il vous plaît, que vous avez exposés récemment?
Bonjour, merci de me recevoir. En effet, j'ai réalisé une évaluation des pratiques méthodologiques des essais Pfizer.
I deliberately left it in French to just capture the mood of it, but essentially what was coming out in that interview was a huge amount of tremendous and accurate research by Christine Cotton. If you go to the UK column website, there are many articles. Just bring this one up on screen. Okay, we'll start here. So we've got Christine Cotton, and obviously that's one of the French interviews. We also spoke to former French head of the vaccine service in France, Christian Perron. That was an extremely interesting interview. But also we've got other interviews, including Christine Cotton, and indeed including a number of French experts, kindly hosted by Alex. Now, where this leads us is that due to Christine Cotton's excellent research into what was going wrong around vaccines and vaccine damage, of course, UK column also did really outstanding work having a look at the MHRA vaccine injury data, the so-called yellow card system. And this unique database was set up by Mike Robinson of UK column with some help also from Tim. And this meant that the UK government data on vaccine injuries could, for the first time, be searched. So this database is still running. We'll make sure that there's a note in the show notes so that you can go and find it. But exclusive reporting of the vaccine adverse effects. And of course, it was talking about vaccine adverse effects that produced a lot of censorship for the UK column. But tragic news, very sad loss. On a positive note, it's wonderful that so many people worldwide gave so much of their time to fight the dangers of vaccines and the damage it was doing. And we should certainly recognise Christine for her tremendous efforts. Troubled times, Ben.
They certainly are. They certainly are, Brian. And that's really tragic news. So we're going to jump now to have a look at Albania and its role essentially as an incubation hub, as far as I can tell, for the New World Order, this new international technology-enabled rules-based system that we're being ushered into. We've spoken about it several times over the past couple of weeks even, not predominantly to do with this. A proposed development on Sazan Island, which is just across from the heel of Italy, which Ivanka Trump, of all people, calls a new way to live, but which also just happens to contain 3,600 Soviet-era tunnels and hardened bunkers, and I suppose could potentially be described as a new Epstein-style island. I don't know. I mean, who knows what they...
Who knows?
Who knows what they want to get up to in this place. So a lot of this is centred around the Prime Minister of Albania, who's absolutely in the frame for the development of this proposal to redevelop Sazan Island. This is Edi Rama, who's the PM of Albania. He's a long-term political figure, been in the game for well over 20 years. There's been a lot of discussion, as I said, about his relationship with Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump and this $1.4 billion redevelopment of the 1,400-hectare Sazan Island, which up until very recently was essentially owned by the Albanian people, but has now been flogged off to a consortium of international investors. But what hasn't been discussed in the context of these developments is Rama's relationship with the supposed left wing of the international elite. So we've got the right wing with the Trumps and the Kushners, but the left wing, the Soros family in particular, are also heavily involved with Albania and with Rama personally. George Soros, through his Open Societies vehicles, ploughed $131 million plus into the country over the past 30 years. Alex Soros has maintained a very close personal relationship with Eddie Rama. He calls him his brother in Tirana, and apparently Rama gave a speech at Alex Soros's wedding last year. Thick as thieves.
Coincidence.
Just a coincidence. But I find this incredibly striking, right? Because apparently, so we're told, the Trumps and the Soroses are on the opposite sides of the aisle, aren't they? They don't like each other, do they? It's the left and the right. They hate each other, don't they?
It is interesting that as society is increasingly divided and made antagonistic, one side against the other, there's supposedly a mirror image amongst the rich and the powerful, except when you really look behind the scenes, when you find them in bed together, often in an accurate sense. So,
sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, yes.
Indeed.
And actually, this perfectly maps. If we can get this back on screen, that perfectly maps that left and right, the left and right side of this visual you can see in front of you, perfectly mapped to the left and right of the divide and rule that I was talking about earlier. So on the right, you've got the supposedly conservative, white nationalists of the Trump family, although they're certainly not acting in the best interest of the American people or the American nation right now. That's certainly the case. And then on the left-hand side, the supposed progressive, left-wing, liberal, open societies. We're all one global citizenry. I'm making up words as I go along, but you understand what I'm saying, right? But behind the scenes, these people are all circulating around each other and most notably in this instance around Eddie Rama and Albania. And I think that's just quite an interesting exemplar, really, of what we're seeing play out globally, how it manifests at a local level.
Not just out of fun and a good glass of wine and good food in the sunshine, they are absolutely producing political policy which is adversely impacting on the world population. So
yes.
Very, very powerful people, very dangerously political people.
Yeah, certainly are. Interestingly, I just note this is from a Sam Williams video that I saw on YouTube the other day, but the Albanian crest, its sigil on the left-hand side there is the double-headed eagle, which is the exact same symbol for the Scottish rite of Freemasonry, the 33rd degree.
Just a coincidence, Ben, I'd have to say.
One day you're going to say it was not a coincidence, Brian.
Well, the one thing I do know is that when we see all these images and the heraldry, we have to ask what it's about. If we don't understand it, somebody spent a huge amount of time and money to create it. So I think there's an onus on the public at large to understand what all of this symbology is about. We see it, of course, around the British royal family, not only in the costumes and the shields, but also in the pomp and the ritual amongst the services. But of course, the true nature of what's happening is never brought to the public. And there's got to be a reason for that. Something's being hidden. It's a cult.
Quite literally, yeah, it is a cult. It's a cult information. We've been talking about Albania for quite some time. And I did a search on the UK Column website yesterday, I think it was, just to see how we'd been talking about it. And I came across this video from AV8, which I'm guessing was 2018. It says so there, from Soros to Blair, which expands a bit on the relationship between Eddie Rama and Albania with Soros, and Soros is one of his favourites, Tony Blair.
And we've got to say to the audience, get onto the UK Column website. The link will be in the show notes, and have a look at this full presentation by Olsi Jazeksi. But this man's got up on the stage. His English was better than he thought. Everybody absolutely understood what he had to say. He'd got a sense of humour. He was talking some very, very fascinating about political information around Albania. And we've got a clip here just at the very start of what he says. By the time he'd finished these words, the audience couldn't wait to hear more from him as he described how Albania had been destroyed by its liaison with the European Union. But let's hear the introduction from Ian Crane and hear what Olsi has to say.
So it's a tremendous pleasure. He's come all the way from Tirana in Albania to be with us for the weekend. And it really is a tremendous pleasure to welcome him to the AV platform.
Hello, everybody. My name is Olsi. And as you already understand, I'm not a native English speaker. So I hope you'll pardon my French, as you say. And my presentation is today mainly about this nice guy, that he behaves himself as a supreme leader or as a kind of His Majesty in my home country, which is Albania. And this other guy is our present Prime Minister. So this is a picture from the year 2013, when Mr. Tony Blair got a new position in Albania as a chief advisor to our government. So, as you can understand, they are here in a cabinet meeting. I'll show you later on a picture with all our government ministers. And Mr. Blair is giving his holy fatwas, or since he's a Catholic, I would say his holy bullahs, religious verdicts to our government for obedience and compliance. So the title of my presentation is From Soros to Blair, Pillaging the Wealth of Nations. I'm going to explain what is going on with a number of nations in Eastern Europe, and not only Albania, and in a way to make you understand why we Albanians, Ukrainians, Romanians, and so forth, like so much to leave our beautiful home countries and come and invade your beautiful England, and Great Britain, by the way.
So there we are. It is a fantastic talk. People need to listen to understand the horrors of having Tony Blair helping to rebuild your country. But in that introduction, Olsi says the key thing. I'm going to tell you why people from my country, Albania and Eastern Europe, are leaving their countries in order to invade your country. And this is the key thing. If the young men involved in violence on the streets of Northern Ireland bothered to listen to this man's talk, they would start to understand who the actual enemy is, as opposed to burning some poor nurse out of her home in Northern Ireland. So really fantastic talk. The audience at that event that also spoke, the AV event, I think they were stunned really by the delivery, the clarity of his evidence and his arguments, and the beautiful way he put it across. So I have to say that. But if you say, why are all these people in the UK or in Western Europe? Because they've been driven out of their homelands. And here's somebody from Albania talking about how it was done.
With Blair as Supreme Leader.
Supreme Leader.
Isn't that an extraordinary thing to hear?
Yeah.
Blair is Supreme Leader in Albania, and Edi Rama there, pictured in 2013, being talked about in 2018, still the Prime Minister, doing the bidding of Blair and everyone in his orbit.
Yes.
Apparently. I think that deserves some deeper exploration and maybe updating all of that within the context of everything that we've been talking about. And just to finish up, looking at what Edi Rama and the Albanian government are up to at the moment, this is Diela, which means the sun. And this is the Minister for Artificial Intelligence in Albania, who was born on January 19th, 25, with the goal of enhancing online services for citizens of all ages through voice, visuals, and speed. Since January, Diela has served as the virtual assistant of the national platform, e-Albania. As Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Diela represents a bold step for Albania towards the institutionalization of advanced technologies, positioning the country at the forefront of innovation in the region and beyond. And AI is the Minister for Artificial Intelligence in Albania.
Correct. And Tony Blair, absolutely glowing praise and indeed effort to make this happen.
Yes.
This is demonic, in my opinion. I'll use that word absolutely for a reason. This is demonic. And Tony Blair, one of the individuals behind it.
Yeah, summoning the demons. And not just one, actually, many, as Eddie Rama will now describe to us.
To share for first time that Diela is pregnant and she's expecting 83 kids. Each kid for one member of our parliament. That will serve the MPs as an assistant, that will participate in the parliamentary sessions, that will keep record of everything that is happening, that will inform and will suggest to the MPs how to react, that will have all the knowledge, these kids will have all the knowledge of their mom about the EU legislation and everything. And just something that you would like very much as a Turk, when you would go for a coffee, because and we have much better coffee than in Germany, as you know. So the risk is that we go for the coffee and you forget to come back to work. When you come back, this kid will tell you what was being said when you were not there, and if your name was mentioned, and if you have to counterattack someone that mentioned you for the wrong reasons.
Well, I tell you what, as long as an AI, Ali Aslan, is not interviewing it.
Yeah, horrific. And I can imagine people who might see the clip of the UK column reporting that clip on its own. They think it's a joke, but this is not a joke. It's obscene. And this is what Tony Blair and other powerful individuals have been helping to create in Albania. And I'll just add that when the Albanian gentleman Olsi was speaking, so he introduced Blair, he's talking about Soros, he's talking about migration, but he quickly starts off with the role of war in countries in order to get them moving and changing societies. And that war, of course, largely fomented by NATO and the Western powers in Eastern Europe. Now, you've got a sneak preview there of Al Carns, the man, Defense Secretary, has just resigned. But this is a little video clip where he's being interviewed by Sky, News. And what is it about? Well, it's about war. He's not happy. We haven't got enough money for war. The money we've got isn't being spent properly. And what we need to do is to transform the whole of the United Kingdom into a war society, prepared for the war which he said is coming. And I think he could be right, because, of course, it's the Western powers that want to create this war. So let's see this man in action.
Well, I'm joined now by Al Carns, who resigned as Armed Forces Minister last week, just hours after speaking to Kathy Newman on Sky News. Al Carns, thank you so much for joining us. Lots to talk to you about, but let's start with that comment that we just heard from Lisa and Andy about how other departments are being asked to look for possible savings to help fund defense. What do you make of that comment, and had you heard it last week, might it have changed your mind about resigning?
Well, I've been going on about this for 2 years. We keep taking defence as a completely separate issue. You know, defence is much broader than, in fact, it should be regarded as a national resilience. So how do we think about health security? How do we think about job security? How do we think about economic security? It should be the central cohering principle of government, not something on a separated silo that you have to raid other government departments to support. It should be the central keyring strategy as we move forward in such a dangerous world, as we've seen on the news with the Middle East, Ukraine, and even in the English Channel just yesterday.
But so in light of that, because the system is as it is right now, what do you make of the fact that other departments are apparently, according to Lisa Nandy, being asked to make savings? I mean, the system may not be as you wanted it to be, but do you think that the Prime Minister might have slightly changed his mind?
Yeah, so I think if my resignation and John's resignation results in a change of direction, which creates more funding for defence, that's great news. But what I would say is we must ensure it's spent on the right thing and we get really good value for tax-paying money. And the Defence Investment Plan needs to change to make sure that it's not buying kit and equipment for the last war, but for the next war. But I'd also like to see that resource go into building our national resilience, everything from cadets all the way through to defence industry, and really doing what we started under John Healey, was making that engine for growth across the country.
Well, there we are. I think I announced his title incorrectly. Armed Forces Minister is introduced, but of course we've lost John Healey, is also gone. We've got to transform the country. We've got to get the children involved. We've got to produce more drones to hunt men and women in Ukraine. And he's not going to be happy until we've done this. Somebody in the chat box has suggested now's the time for me to say a very dangerous individual. And I'm very happy to say that.
Certainly seems so. Another very dangerous individual, Keir Starmer, just made a big announcement this morning about the use of social media in the under-16s. Let's have a little listen.
Because today is a big moment for our country. This is a big step, real change for our children and our future. Because today I can announce that the government will ban access to social media for all children under the age of 16. And this is not something I do lightly, and I will not present it as cost-free, as if social media has brought no benefits to young people, because clearly that is wrong. But government is always about choices, and it's clear to me that a full ban is the right choice. Now, I come to it as a parent myself. I know exactly the fears that we all feel when we're thinking about this issue. All I've ever wanted for my own children, hand on heart, is for them to be happy and for them to be safe. And I think that's what any parent wants. But I ask the question now, do we truly believe that social media creates a happy environment for our children? Do we truly believe that it's a place where they can feel safe? I don't think I even need to answer those questions, do I?
So this is a full ban on social media for under-16s, Brian?
Well, just think what that man said. He wants his children and other children to be happy and safe. He doesn't want them to think for themselves. He doesn't want them to have any proper human values. He doesn't want them to have any morality. And he certainly doesn't want them to have any spirituality. So what Starmer wants is brain-dead young people, and he is desperate to keep the brighter youngsters who clearly are starting to understand that they're being attacked by their own government. He doesn't want them near social media.
Certainly not. I think you're 16, you're old enough to join the army, aren't you?
17. I
17
believe, but of course the cadets are available there.
But you can't look at hurty words on the internet. So what does this actually entail? So this is going to be a ban on social media for under-16s. It's focused on these platforms: TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, X, Reddit, Facebook, Twitch, Kick and Threads. Brian, I know you've been on Kick a lot recently. And
I don't even know what it is.
Well, here's the kicker, right? So first of all, it's controlling access to information information, but also it is only enforceable through digital ID.
Yeah, what a surprise!
Of course, it's about digital ID. It's always been about digital ID. And let's be honest, Starmer's got no interest in protecting children, although the BBC did go and talk to the people most affected by this, of course, getting the feedback from the shop floor, or should I say from the classroom. And let's have a little listen to this clip from BBC News earlier today.
Please put your hands up, those of you who welcome the ban. Hands up for those who welcome the ban. So this just gives you an idea. I think it's pretty fair to say that most of these students there, 11 to 14, most are pretty disappointed with the ban. Let's just come over to you, Isabella. Tell me how you felt when you heard the Prime Minister say no more social media for you.
I didn't think it would actually happen. I kind of believed that he'd chicken out of it and give it more time or more consideration, but he seems pretty sure of it, and I'm not sure if I agree with him.
What are you most worried about?
Not being able to contact my friends. I don't know what will happen and how it will happen, or whether if there's some technicalities to what apps are restricted, but I use most of my social media to contact my parents and family.
I mean, I think it's worth reminding people, earlier we looked at screen time. What was your screen time over the weekend?
9 hours.
9 hours. So suddenly you're going to have a lot more time to fill. And what will you do?
Stare at a wall.
So,
critical response there.
And nobody else got interviewed? Or was that just your clip?
That was just a clip that I came across, right? No, but they went to the kiddos.
Right, so one thing's for sure, 9 hours in front of a screen, that's an issue for her parents, not the government. And if her parents are stupid enough to allow Keir Starmer to decide what their daughter can and can't see, parents are in for big trouble.
Yeah. But the little statement at the end there, what will you do? I will just stare at the wall. Well, the thing is, the staring at the wall and getting bored is where all creativity comes from. Right. And actually, the mobile phone use, social media use, just this constant distraction is one of the things that's really suppressing our collective potential at the moment. So in some ways, this is a good thing, but it's not being brought to us in the correct fashion. And actually, if you were going to do this, I think that a ban on device use, not social media use, would be the best way to do it. And actually, in reality, it should have little, if anything, to do with the state, right? This is a parenting issue, so far as I'm concerned. And I can guarantee you now that Starmer has got absolutely no interest in protecting children because of, I don't know, how many examples could we potentially pull out. Just one of them is the fact that when he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, he decided to reduce sentences for child sex offenders so they wouldn't all go to prison. But apparently he's all about helping the kiddies. Amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing.
And let's not forget, this is also part of a World Economic Forum agenda. So Mike talked about this at the end of last week, London Tech Week, and the introduction of AI into the lives of the poorest children in the country. This event was delivered in collaboration with Founders Forum Group, who I've talked about a lot previously. It's run by a guy called Brent Hoberman, who's a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, or probably not that young anymore. He was a young global leader about 20 years ago. And importantly, at London Tech Week, as well as Starmer and everything else that was going on, Sadiq Khan was there. Also, you had old Prince Billy, who rolled in to give sovereign approval to the entire programme. Obviously, he was there to talk about using artificial intelligence to help end homelessness, because, of course, that's the best way to end homelessness is AI.
The royal family are keeping us safe. Now, with a look at the clock, we must end the UK column news there, I think. But one of the comments that we wanted to make, prompted by Gemma, who was also looking at the news earlier this morning, is that amazing to see the pushback against Keir Starmer. So the posts under the BBC's report of it was on X, I think she said, the pushback.
All the comments, the Telegraph comment section she mentioned as well.
Everybody is now seeing through what this insidious man Starmer is doing, but also, of course, his political masters and a phenomenal pushback by the public. So we want to end today's news on an encouraging note, and that is it's clear that many people are now becoming awake to the fact that the government is the body attacking them, and they're pushing back by making those comments, and particularly on social media. So it makes me smile that Starmer wants to keep children away because they might actually learn something they're not going to learn through the BBC. So positive note, people seeing things, people speaking out. What we need to do is make sure that people stay together, work together, build bridges between the divides, because this is what we really need to counter the globalist policies that would divide and rule us.
Absolutely.
We'll end there. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined UK Column News today. We will be back in a few minutes for UK Column Extra if you are a UK Column member. If you're not, the news will be back at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.